Hello and welcome. The word Talibanization has created a sense of fear in the West, with a strong implication of radical Islam taking over control. For Pakistan, a state already in political and social upheaval, a move to negotiate with the Taliban has caused a backlash from its Western allies. So what's the real consequence of letting the Taliban establish rule based around religious law? And how extreme could the interpretation of that law turn out to be? Pakistan's frontier has become a focus for Western powers trying to curb the spread of radical ideology. The Taliban's influence has clearly crossed over the Afghanistan border and entrenched itself in recent weeks to valleys northwest of Islamabad. Even as he indicated support for the Pakistani government during a visit to the region, the British Prime Minister Gordon Brown warned of the perils posed by the, quote, crucible of terror in the border region.
It's absolutely clear that there is a chain of terror that starts in these border areas and sweeps right across the world and ends up with impact in our capital cities and indeed in other cities in the world.
The Pakistani Taliban has control of the Swat Valley through a controversial peace accord signed last month, but has broken its promise to disarm and has been seeking to extend its influence in breach of the agreement by sending militants south into Bunar and west into the region of Dir. On Sunday, the Pakistani army launched an offensive in Dir in an attempt to push back the Taliban after Washington expressed concerns over the leeway the Taliban was being given. The US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton spoke of worries that the advancing Taliban could eventually seize control of the country, including, quote, the keys to the nuclear arsenal of Pakistan. President Zardari has insisted that the nation's nuclear weapons are safe. On today's program, we're asking, what are the implications of Talibanization in Pakistan? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and take part. And we, of course, will welcome your phone calls on the show as well. Well, joining me to discuss the issue from New York is Yasmin Hassan, a Pakistani lawyer who's Deputy Director of Programs at Equality Now, an international women's rights organization based in New York. With me here in Washington, D.C. is Farhana Ali, Senior Fellow at the Center for Advanced Studies on Terrorism and former policy analyst at the RAND Corporation. I welcome you both to the show.
Thank you.
Yasmin Hassan, if I could start with you there in New York and ask what you see as the results of the Taliban's control of the Swat Valley and other nearby regions. How has it affected the lives of the people there?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of fear. People, if you talk to local people, first of all, they're very scared to even talk to you or say anything which could come back to haunt them and their families. We have been communicating. Equality Now's method of doing work is to get in touch with grassroots levels organizations and try to see what the needs are there. That has almost been impossible in Pakistan because of the fear generated by the Taliban. Anonymously, we've been told that the situation is really, really bad. Women and girls especially are terrorized. They can't even leave the houses anymore. They can't go to the market. They are denied an education. And as you've seen in the recent video that was shown all over YouTube, is the flogging of that woman. Recently, a couple was shot dead. So there are major human rights repercussions, especially for women, for everybody, and then especially for women.
And Farhana Ali, well, how is that being received here? I mean, from what you know of the situation there, and how is that being received in places such as the US when they see the impact of the Taliban's rule?
Well, it has a negative impact, and certainly it can adversely affect U.S.-Pakistan relations, which had been on a, trying to stabilize that relationship. It's always been a shaky relationship to begin with, particularly since the Afghan Jihad. And now Pakistan has now experienced cycles of violence over these, especially in recent months. And so with these statements that are coming from Washington, it's really actually hurting the Pakistani elite. And so the officials that I speak with inside Pakistan, particularly this morning I spoke with a Pakistani army official, and I was at the Pakistani ambassador's office last week, and there were growing concerns from the Pakistani establishment of the what they consider misperceptions that are perceived by Washington, one of which is what you stated earlier, that the nuclear arsenal will fall into the hands of the Taliban, which they think is preposterous.
Right. Well, Yasmin Hassan, I've read your articles, particularly the one in the Washington Post just a couple of months ago, where you were just describing the impact of the Talibanization of northwestern Pakistan, the shooting of women accused of, quote, immoral activities, the shutting down of hundreds of schools. How has the Taliban managed to get such a grip on the place there? Aren't local people reacting in any way to the imposition of these kind of rules?
Local people were, and if you read the recent news reports, even in Bonaire, local people had formed their own militias where they had seen that the government, law enforcement or the army wasn't living up to their expectations. But the Taliban have been so brutal and they work in such a vicious manner with all the beheading in public squares and you know, targeting people's family members and all that, that there really has been a lot of fear generated, and that has been really, really counterproductive to even people taking action against this.
Now, can you see any...
And you know, I just would...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you see anything positive that's come out of Taliban rule? I mean, has there been anything that can actually be you know, like, for example, a stabilization of the community or a reduction in crime or anything like this? It sounds like it just completely has gone the other way, hasn't it?
Well, you know what, in Taliban, when they first came in Afghanistan, and my work was in Afghanistan before, you know, the last 5 years or so, when they came in Afghanistan, there was so much corruption in the government there that the Taliban were, you know, people were positive about them because one thing the Taliban weren't was corrupt. And, you know, there was efficient justice and all, you know, dispensed under the Taliban. That's what the platform on which they are running, and that's a lot of news reports you see coming out of the area is that this is going to be quick justice. The justice system in that area does not work. But our concern is anybody that I see interviewed with respect to this deal, the sharia deal, and anybody we see celebrating, it's all men. The voices of women have been silenced. There has been no recognition given or any platform given to women to voice their concerns or participate equally in this. And I feel that Taliban rule anywhere is like a death to women's participation in public and political life.
And Farhana, the profile of the Taliban has changed as well. We were discussing this a little bit before the show about how, you know, you were saying there's gangs basically now. It's a different kind of makeup.
Well, absolutely, and even our Vice President of the United States has indicated that 5% are actually hard-battled Islamists. So the question really is, who are the Taliban and what do they represent? We understand they represent this harsh interpretation of Islamic law, which, by the way, existed in Swat Valley since 1969. So it really isn't new. What is new is the evolution of the Taliban. So that they've evolved into gangs and thugs and criminals. And so the majority of the Taliban, if you want to de-radicalize them, is then to focus on that core constituency, which is actually because of high unemployment, because of disillusionment or disenchantment with, for example, the very controversial use of the US drone attacks, and in addition to a weak central government in Pakistan, all those issues compounded have actually created this new Taliban.
And in fact, isn't there the danger, Farhana, that Islam as a religion is being tainted by this, you know, the way the Taliban interpretation of it is portrayed as well? Because for a lot of people, they can't differentiate between an extreme interpretation or even a distortion of the religion and the reality, which actually goes against the idea of some of the things that have been happening.
Well, absolutely. It shows that you actually have an uneducated Taliban. The individuals, Sufi Muhammad and other, you know, Taliban who represent the Islamic, you know, judicial system are actually uneducated in Islamic theory, and they do not hold degrees from accredited Islamic universities like Al-Azhar University in Cairo, etc. And yet these are the individuals who proclaim to provide justice in the name of Islam and who have then in essence reinterpreted Sharia law, which is a danger to Pakistan's vibrant civil society.
Yasmin Hassan, is there any argument you can see for engaging with the Taliban to try to resolve this? I mean, if there's going to be some solution in dealing with the Taliban, is it going to be something military, tackled through military action, or is it something that could be done through engagement?
I doubt. I mean, I know that President Obama has also voiced that talking to all elements, including moderate Taliban. When you work from a women's rights perspective, that is very, very dangerous, given the history of Taliban rule in Afghanistan, what they've done so far in Pakistan. From a women's rights perspective, I don't think there is any basis of engagement at all. Okay. So I don't know whether the solution is a military solution, a law enforcement solution. It is something that governments, the Pakistani government has to take under control, and they have to uphold the rights of like the citizens of that area, and in particular women of that area, as guaranteed in the Constitution and various international conventions ratified by Pakistan.
And Farhana, there's the issue of Pakistan's effort to try and tackle the Taliban. It seems that any military effort seems to have been very ineffective as well.
Well, absolutely. Actually, the Pakistani military, at least least the military sources I speak to, do not want to take the military approach. They know they've been demoralized. They know they've had to, in fact, they've incurred more casualties in this war than they would have liked. And in speaking to the military officer earlier today, he said to me, it's not that we cannot take action. You know, what are a couple of hundred Taliban to us? We have the manpower, we have the resources, but it's a question of will. It's not a question of capability, according to the officer, it's a question of will. And if you see what's happening in Bunir district now, the local population is turned against the Pakistani army, so they're very reluctant to take any action. If you see why action has been taken now, it's because of international pressure, the international outcry against Pakistani government for doing nothing. And so Pakistan has had to actually prove that it is a strong force and capable of rooting out its terrorist elements.
Well, Farhan Ali and Yasmin Hassan, I'm going to ask you both to stand by because we have to take a very short break now. We'll have more of our discussion in a moment. Now, as we pause, let me remind you, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments. Livestation.com is still going strong there. The chat room's taking place. You can see the debate there. We also have a poll in our chat room where we're asking, what are the implications of religious rule in the Swat Valley? Let us know what you think in that chat room poll. We'll be right back.